One.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. It's me, Jam, and I'm joined by Just Jude today.
Howdy. Welcome to Bake into a Pie Magic.
Today, we're going to be talking about burst card draw versus engine card draw, where we think burst is better and where we think engines might be better.
Yeah, so this was a topic that I mainly wanted to discuss because I have strong opinions on burst card draw in Commander. And before we really get into this, I do want to preface yes, engines are good. I'm not saying that engines aren't good. Rhystic Study is an obscene spell. The One Ring is an obscene spell. Like, that's an entire protect yourself from everything spell with a just small bonus extra scaling draw engine on top of that. Engines are good. You should run engines. However, I think that you should run a healthy mix of both engines and burst draw because in a lot of cases they serve different purposes, and burst card draw has advantages over uh, card draw engines. So I think it's good to have a mix of both of them.
Yeah, and
Uh,
today we're going to talk about what circumstances you want to run each of them in.
yep. So I think our first advantage here is that burst card draw spells tend to be a little bit better in decks that want to win fast. How card draw engines work is that they accumulate value over time, and that's very good for most traditional commander games because commander games tend to run pretty long, as I'm sure you have noticed. Um, so cards like Beast Whisper, Phyrexian Arena, the aforementioned Rhystic Study, these will all draw you a lot of cards over the course of a game. However, say that you don't want to try to win next turn or in 5 turns from now. Let's say you're going for a win relatively early. Let's say, for examples, for the cards that we have here as examples, let's say we're going for a win on turn 7. Harmonize lets you draw 3 cards. Beast Whisper lets you draw a card whenever you cast a creature spell for the same mana cost, 2 green green, both at sorcery speed. Beast Whisper also is a body that's not really super relevant here, at least not to this specific point. So Harmonize lets you look at more cards sooner, which can be useful for purposes of planning out turns, interacting with people, and just generally having more information to make better decisions. And while Beast Whisper might draw you more cards over time, having cards sooner can be a big advantage, especially if, for example, you have ramped and you can then play something else on this turn to make use of those cards immediately, which kind of leads into a sub point of this in that burst card draw is a little bit better in decks that tend to be lower curved because there is a higher chance that you can immediately do something with the extra cards you've drawn. But yeah. Jam, do you have anything to say on this point?
Yeah, combo and aggro are like decks that like are trying to win faster. And sometimes, especially if you have like the combo piece in your hand or you have the early game aggro creature, you want to play those first. And a lot of what engines do is they make you want to like hold your cards until you have the engine down. And so with like combo and aggro, a lot of burst can like be really helpful,
Yeah.
especially for like those early turns or those turns you're gonna try and win.
It can also help you dig for things like land drops if you aren't casting it on curve, stuff like that.
Advantage number two.
More card selection. Now, there are engines that do card selection pretty good as well. Sylvan Library and Ripples of Undeath both come to mind here. But generally, kind of like the last point, those will let you look at more cards over a longer period of time. And In a similar case to the last example, sometimes you need to see a lot of cards now, particularly when you're looking for something specific, or perhaps one specific type of piece that you have some redundancies of. Dig Through Time is a great example of a card like this because you can discount it pretty heavily, and it lets you look at 7 cards and take the best 2, so it replaces itself and its card advantage. I don't think anyone needs me to tell them that Dig Through Time is a good spell, but the card selection part of it is what I'm most interested in specifically highlighting with it here. Jam, you got anything for this point?
Yeah, tutors.
Tutors, yes.
Tutors are basically like, if tutors are good, then looking at a lot of cards and well, the reason why tutors are good is because they let you look at your entire deck and choose any card and put it into your hand. Engines are good, but they're not gonna like let you look at your entire deck and put whatever card into your deck. So like burst card draw is much more likely to have like not exactly tutors, but like tutor esque effects where they like let you look at more cards, sometimes 7, sometimes 12, or just
If you
like
want
crazy
to,
ridiculous numbers and do like a pseudo tutor effect.
and if you want a card that both tutors and draws you extra cards on top of it, I can highly recommend Insatiable Avarice. Good spell. There are also the odd tutor engine. Varagoth Blood Sky Sire comes to mind, but they're pretty rare, and I can't really think of that many good ones. But
Yeah, Varagoth puts it on top, which means you want
yeah,
like draw effects to go with it to make
yeah.
it decent.
Yep.
Uh, Advantage number 3.
Your burst draw spells are typically less vulnerable to interaction. Most engines are permanents, and most burst draw spells are instants or sorceries. Just as a matter of fact, for that, then, most engines are easier to interact with because while both of these things can be hit by counter spells, something like a professional facebreaker could also be hit with creature removal or something like anguished unmaking that can hit any type of permanent except lands. So, you know, if I'm playing something that isn't blue and a professional facebreaker hits the board, I'm going to be looking to remove that almost as soon as possible. If I'm not playing blue and my opponent casts a Jessica's Will, there's not a lot I can do about that. Your mileage with this will vary based on how much people are actually playing interaction at your table, but that's a judgment call to make. And obviously, both cards are very good.
I will say, yeah, especially with like how many board wipes are in the format and stuff.
Yeah.
In order for engines to like be effective, they have to stick around. And sometimes you're not gonna like want to remove the engine because there's a scarier threat. But most of the time, like if you see an engine on the battlefield, you know that it's like going to do a lot of work throughout the game, and you might want to like see if you can remove it at any time. Whereas burst draw, it just goes on to the stack, and you have to interact right then and there.
Yeah. I mean, I think the point about just incidentally getting stuff removed is also like more important than people might think. Because like if someone has a Trigon Predator that they're mainly using to bully the artifacts player out of the game, if they have a turn where they don't need to hit the artifact player with that, maybe they can just hit you, take out your Phyrexian Arena or something. A lot of the time it'll just happen incidentally, and that is a weakness of engines.
All right. Advantage number 4.
X spells. X spells are really good. They fold in all of the advantages that we have previously talked about. They are better in combo and aggro strategies, I feel. They typically give you some manner of card selection, and they are less vulnerable to interaction, while also scaling with the amount of mana that you have. Stargaze is here as the example because I have been really loving this spell recently. Since it came out in Bloomborough, I knew it was going to be good, but I've just been impressed with how good it is. It draws you cards and it loads up your graveyard, and it also technically doesn't draw cards, so it gets around things like Narset. And sure, it's sorcery speed, kind of expensive both in terms of mana and life. However, those are all prices worth paying, in my opinion, for all of the upside that this gets you. Pull from Tomorrow is, I think, a more traditional EDHX spell, but
Well,
I want to talk.
I like Pull from Tomorrow because it shuffles in, right?
Does it? I'd kind of forgotten about that.
Well, a lot of my favorite X spells are the ones that like shuffle into your library because there's like certain points where like you're just like I want to cast this now, but I could hold on to it and cast it later, and you're like and you get decision paralysis. Whereas the ones that shuffle back into your library can sometimes help alleviate some of that decision
Okay, yeah, like Blue
paralysis.
Sun Zenith and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Pull from Tomorrow shuffles back in. But that's like yeah, that's a nice feature on those definitely. I also think that this type of card can be especially good when you're digging for land drops, like if you're screwed or if you are like missing a color in particular. Burst draw engines are great, or burst draw engines. Burst draw card advantage is great for digging and trying to find land drops that you might not otherwise have, whereas your engines aren't necessarily going to help you out with them with that, if you can even cast them. That's why a lot of the burst draw spells that you do tend to see are lower mana value typically, stuff like Night's Whisper. But the higher cost ones can be good too.
I will say though, a lot of the time when like evaluating what kind of draw suite you want to run, you'll like want to like look at your theme and look at who your commander is, and that can like help you determine what draw suite you want to run. But definitely, you want maybe at least uh, a few like burst effects.
Yeah, it's good to have a healthy mix, and obviously some decks are going to want more burst draw, and some are going to want more engines. Think about a faster aggro or combo based list versus maybe a graveyard deck that wants to grind into the late game. The former is going to prefer burst draw, the latter is going to prefer engines because they play into the deck's themes more. But I do think it's good for all types of decks to have at least a little bit of each.
Uh, I will say an advantage that we did not put on here that is that I'm just now thinking about is late game engines aren't always great.
Yeah, that was something I meant to brought up, but I kind of just forgot. Yeah. Something that I like to do with cards sometimes is apply what I call the top deck test to them. I think a lot of people have variations of this, but it's just if I'm drawing this card when I have no other cards in hand, am I happy to see it? And this isn't foolproof because, there are some cards that you kind of will want to include or have to include that don't pass this test. For example, most lands you're not going to be too happy to see. And also a lot of ramp, lots of removal falls into this category as well. But it is worth thinking about, especially for decks that don't have access to a lot of good, like card quality wise draw, whether that's based on colors or budget or both.
Or theme sometimes too.
Or theme, yeah.
I will say though, I'm almost never hellbent, so I've never had to deal with this problem.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Blue players am I
The
right?
the top deck test is kind of a like outlandish scenario, but it can also more or less apply to other scenarios. Like if I already have two lands in hand and that's all I'm working with, and my third card off the top is like a Phyrexian Arena, I'm not necessarily as happy as I would be about with like a Painful Truths, say.
All right. And now we're going to talk about some of our favorite engines and burst because Just cause.
Yeah. Yeah, originally we were kind of structuring this as more of like we were each going to argue the virtues of each. Like Jam would be the draw engines, and I would be talking about burst draw. But we kind of dropped that, and so the original pitch with this was talking about like a card from the alternate category that you really like, and this is what I picked for that. Boomer Scrapper, which is a Universes Beyond card from Fallout. I am going to read it because I don't think a lot of people know this card. This is 1 black and a red for a creature human soldier. He's a 1/1. Whenever Boomer Scrapper enters the battlefield or attacks, you lose 1 life and create a junk token. Junk tokens are basically like exile draw tokens. You can sack them, exile the top card of your library, cast it this turn. And he also has, whenever a token you control leaves the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Boomer Scrapper. I love this card. It doesn't actually give you cards to hand, but as previously discussed, that can actually be an upside sometimes. And it also promotes using the card a little bit more thoughtfully and trying to be mindful of, should I crack this immediately? Maybe I'm digging for a land drop, so it's worth it if I have to permanently exile a good spell, or maybe I'm trying to play a little bit of a grindier game so I can afford to crack the junk later when I have the mana to cast whatever I top deck. Uh, it is also a creature that grows, and especially if you are running tokeny aristocrat strategies, this guy gets out of control really fast. And I just like being able to have a draw engine that can also put in some good old elbow crease and get some damage for me.
I will say, put some trample on this guy.
Yeah, evasion helps if you can get it. But, you know.
Especially in these colors, a lot of the evasion that you're gonna get is like.
Yeah, trample or like menace or something, which
I mean, you could give him Swamp Walk.
with what? I'm
Uh,
struggling to think of any Swamp Walk granters off the top of my head.
well, there's one that you know the elemental cycle. No, no, not the elemental cycle. The Fury cycle or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
The black one gives Swamp Walk.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
And like it's not the best, but especially since Urborg is in the format, it's like not the
Yeah.
worst either.
I mean, I was just imagining my idyllic world where everyone is just playing black all the time, which is peak Magic the Gathering to me. But I
Uh,
think I might.
I
I don't
mean,
know if you agree with me.
black. I like black because like a lot of the times board states get clogged, and sometimes you're not able to swing in, and black can like deal damage without swinging in.
Yeah,
But
it's good at that.
I think I like red a little bit more in that scenario.
That's reasonable. Red is a good color. It doesn't really shine as much in Commander, but I do like red quite a bit.
All
And
right.
speaking of red cards,
This is my burst card draw that I picked because I want to yap about a specific archetype. So this is Collected Conjuring. It's 2 blue and a red. You exile the top 6 cards of your library. That's a lot of cards to look at. You may cast up to 2 sorcery cards with converted mana cost 3 or less from among them without paying their mana cost. Put the exiled cards not cast this way in the bottom of your library in a random order. So if you don't cast them, you still have access to them later in the game. And I like this in Dragon's Approach because all your like popular sort, most of your deck is 3 or less Dragon's Approach, and so hitting like a lot of them off the top 6 is just like extremely likely. And then I also like this in Dragon's Approach because there's an artifact that when it enters, it imprints 2 sorcery cards from your graveyard. And whenever you cast one of the cards, if it has, and whenever you cast a card, if it has the same name as a card imprinted under the artifact, you get the other spell you get the other spell, you may play it for free. And so you can like cast a lot of collected conjurings in like a single turn. And it's pretty wild.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to mess around with this much, but I do remember when it was first spoiled and being like, "Yo, a collected company, but for sorceries? That's sick." Um, I'm a little sad that it's only sorceries because that restricts the type of decks it can go into heavily. And obviously, not every instant is something you would want to cast with this. Like, you don't hitting a counter spell off this would not feel great, for
Well, it
example.
does say May.
Yeah, it does say May. Like, it's not like you're going to be forced to, like counter your own thing. It's just like, there's still instants you could whiff on if this card could cast instants, but it can't, and that's kind of a shame. But
Well,
still sweet.
you should play Dragon's Approach. Then you can play Collected Conjuring. I guess it
Uh,
also works in Slime Against Humanity, but then you're in three colors. And
yeah, Teamer Slime Against Humanity.
I mean, it works. There's Flubs the Fool.
Oh yeah, that probably would be. Yeah.
And
Well,
you
you
can
go. You go.
you can copy the spell a lot of times because well, there's two cards that I know that like work really well in Dragon's Approach that are like engines, but they copy instants and sorceries. And so like I like to jam a lot of sorceries in my Dragon's Approaches decks that are like burst draw, simply so that if I can like start copying them, and it's just like very yummy.
Copies are fun.
All right. I think that's all we have to say today. Sorry it was a little bit of a shorter episode. We didn't want our other co host to miss out on too much.
Yeah. But I hope it was still entertaining. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed me taking somewhat more of an active role this time around. And yeah, see you next time.
I think you're always pretty active, though.
Aw, thanks, Jam.
All right.
I try to bring good energy.
Remember to deck build and drive safe.
That's right. Deck build and drive at the same time.
No, I said you want to deck build because you're playing Magic the Gathering, but you also want to drive safe because but don't do those
Yeah.
things at the same time.
No, you can multitask. It's fine. Have a good one.
Bye.